Travis Wammack, professional musician, songwriter, producer, anything that's got anything to do with the music business, I'm there. I was born in Walnut, Mississippi. My parents moved to Memphis, Tennessee when I was about 4 years old, and I grew up in Memphis. My dad came in with a guitar when I was 8 years old. I'd get my guitar when I come in school, and I'd go down on this, it's called Broad Street, and I would hit every store down there and play my guitar, and they'd put money in the hole of my guitar. And I was down on Broad Street one afternoon walking over my guitar, and I had this guy. He walked up and he said, "Hey, son, can you play that guitar?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Do you sing?" "Yes, sir." "Let me hear you." So I played a couple of songs. He said, "Well, I'm a DJ in town." He said, "My name's Eddie Bond." And he said, "I do back then they called shows jamborees." He said, "I do a jamboree all over the southern states." And he said, "I'd like to get you to open the shows." So I started opening the shows, and back then there'd be 8 or 9 artists on the show. I'd Johnny Cash, Carl Perkins, Charlie Feathers, a lot of the rockabilly singers, the Burnett brothers, and I got to open the shows for all these guys. And this was when I was about 10 years old. Eddie asked me, he said, "I want to cut a record on you. Have you got some songs you've written?" I said, "Yeah." We went to Fernwood Recording Studio, which was a little garage back then. And guess who my engineer was? Elvis's guitar player, Scotty Moore. And about the time I turned 14, I had a friend of mine that lived in the neighborhood, Prentice McPhail, and he said, "Look here, I've been doing some sessions up at Sonic Studios," and he said, "I believe you could get in on sessions up there." The guitar player that played on A Whole Lot of Shaking Going On, Great Balls of Fire, Roland James, he left Sun Records and started his own studio. So I told him, I said, "Look, I want to be a star. I've got some songs, I've got some instrumentals, you know." He said, "Well, let me hear some of them." So we cut some instrumentals, and I had a big hit instrumental when I was 16 called Scratchy. We did a reverse tape thing in it. We did a saying in the middle of it, stopped and did this saying, and then he spliced a tape, reversed it, and I had been credited the first record before the Beatles to have reverse tape on an instrumental. So Ray Harris, the owner of High Studios, where Al Green was recording, he called me, and he wanted me to come over and start playing on sessions. So over there I was playing on Ace Cannon, Jerry J, Bill Black Combo, doing sessions there. And then American Studio, they wanted me as an artist, so I left Sonic Studios, my instrumentals, and started doing vocals, and just getting it going pretty good. And Rick Hall came to Memphis and heard me, and as old saying goes, he made me an offer I couldn't refuse. I moved to Muscle Shoals in 1969, and I've been here ever since. Rick Hall had been flying me down to Muscle Shoals before I moved down there, and I noticed my name was never on the sessions, on the albums and stuff. And I asked the secretary, I said, "How come my name's not on?" And she said, "Well, Rick don't want your name on there. Memphis is competition to Muscle Shoals." And I said, "Well, look at all these other guys from Memphis that's on it." She said, "Yeah, but he says you're famous guitar player." And so I said, "All right." So when I moved down, my name started getting on the albums. And about that time was when Jimmy and David made their move, open up Muscle Shoals Sound. So Rick came to me and he said, "Look, I know you know a lot of great players in Memphis. Get me 3 or 4 of everything." He said, "Call them, get them down here." And sure enough, man, we'd have 3 guitar players, 4 drummers, 3 bass players. And he said, "Every which one of you guys comes up with the best lick gets on the session." And it was Katie Bar the door. And I had a bass player that I had found in Stephen Point, Wisconsin, Bob Ray. And he was playing on the road with me, and I moved him to Memphis, and I got him in the studios up there at High Studios. And when I moved down here, I gave him a call, and I said, "Look here, needing a bass player. We're auditioning." So he came down, and Jerry Masters came down, and we recorded a song on Clarence Carter, Patches. Jerry Masters was a bass player on that. Jerry didn't make it as a bass player compared to Bob, but he told Rick, he said, "Look, I'm an engineer too." So Rick put him on salary as an engineer, and lo and behold, Jerry moved on across town, became a great engineer at Muscle Shoals Sound in Miami and all over. Being a guitar player at Fame, we wrote some songs together. His name was Junior Lowe. We had this song that we had just finished writing. The name of it was Greenwood, Mississippi. And we both agreed, this thing would be a hit for John Fogerty or Little Richard. It was just kind of right in between those two. And lo and behold, 2 weeks later, Little Richard comes to the studio. I was leader of the session, and told him, I said, me and Junior Lowe, we wrote a song. He said, Travis, I want to hear the song. So back then, I had it on cassette. So I go out to my pickup, and I played it for him. He said, Travis, I want to record that. So I said, okay. So I went in, I told Rick Hall, I said, Little Richard's wanting to cut Greenwood, Mississippi. So Rick said, great. So we started cutting it. We got about 15 minutes into the session, and I could see Richard in the vocal booth. He kept looking over at me and kind of shaking his head. And finally, he came out, and he came on, he said, Travis, where's that music that you was singing with? Because I had put the demo vocal down. I said, well, Richard, that was my demo, He said, I want to sing on that music track. So I went in and I told Rick, or peed Rick off, but we put Little Richard's vocal on my demo track, and it became the record, and it was his first chart record he had had since the Tutti Frutti days. 2 weeks after Little Richard, Tom Jones comes in. First thing he said was, heard Little Richard's here. And I popped up and I said, yeah, he recorded one of our songs. He said, really? What was it? I said, a song called Greenwood, Mississippi. I want to hear that. I got that little cassette tape, and I took him out in my truck, and I let him hear it. He said, I got to record it. So I went and told Rick, I said, Tom Jones wants to do Greenwood, Mississippi. We cut it on time, a heck of a version. And I tell everybody, I probably had the two greatest rock and roll singers ever to record one of my songs, Tom Jones and Little Richard. Bobbie Gentry came to Fame Studios right after her big hit, Ode to Billy Joe. And Rick Hall was working with her on a song she'd written. And this song was long. I forget how many verses that it started out. And he said, are you going to play your little guitar on this song? Bobbie, she said, Rick, there's so many words. She said, I'm going to have to concentrate. And he said, well, would you mind if Travis played your little guitar? He said, I want to try to keep that Ode to Billy Joe guitar sound that you use. She said, and I'm fine. It was a little old bitty Martin guitar, and it took me a while to get my old fat fingers on the thing, but we used it on the song Fancy, which was a big record for her. And then down the road, Reba McEntire recorded the thing. I liked it because they copied my guitar licks. There was a horn player that summed it up pretty good. I can't remember what his name was, but they asked him, they said, what is the difference between the Muscle Shoals sound and the Memphis sound? And he said, 150 miles. And basically, that's what it is. It's poor people. We didn't go to school. We didn't have the money to go to college. We're self-taught from the heart, not the chart. Maybe it's in the water, I don't know, but it's just Southern players. They play different, and it's low down and nasty. And you can't get that in going to school and college. It's just one of them things.